Before Patrick starts, I'd like to introduce, but it seems like you've already all met each other, our newest director, Jeffrey LeFrancois, who was recently appointed to our board of directors by Governor Hochul. Jeffrey is the Meatpacking District Management Association's executive director. He was the chair of Community 44 for a couple of years, and then until the end of December in 2023. He's served as the chair of our advisory council, as a representative of CD4. He brings his dog Scarlett to the park to do his regular composting, and I think Scarlett leads the way. She's well trained in Hudson River Park as well. We're very lucky to have Jeffrey here. We welcome him to the board, and of course we thank our Tom Pegues, who was our longtime director as well, who has departed the board. So welcome, Jeffrey LeFrancois.
Thank you. I guess she has to come with me next.
Yeah.
Was she appointed?
Okay, let's get started. Good afternoon, everyone. With a quorum being present, I now call to order the March 26th, 2024 meeting of the Hudson River Park Trust Board of Directors. First, I'd like to echo Noreen in welcoming Jeffrey LeFrancois to the board. Welcome.
Thank you.
Please note that the meeting is being recorded and the video will be posted on the Trust website, and the stenographer will provide a transcript of the meeting. The directors have received the agenda materials in advance of this meeting and are free to ask questions or comment at any time on the action items submitted for approval today. Please note, however, questions or comments from the audience will not be entertained at this meeting. I note that the board memos and resolutions on today's agenda have been posted on the Trust website in the link entitled Board Meetings, Bylaws, and Other Materials under Board Agendas and Minutes, and thus are available to the public. There are 6 item agendas on the consent agenda. Number 1, approval of minutes and ratification of the actions taken at the January 25th, 2024 meeting of the Hudson River Park Trust Board of Directors. 2, authorization to contract with Toilets to Go LLC for portable and temporary restroom services. 3, authorization to amend contract with Versig LLC for park-wide access control upgrades. 4, authorization to extend contract term with L&S Associates Inc. for structural inspection of Pier 40 parking garage. 5, ratification of extension of contract terms for on-call legal services contracts. And 6, ratification and approval of the charters, chairs, and members of the Audit, Finance, and Investment and Governance Committees, and ratification of the members of the Design Committee. Unless anyone has any comments, I will now call for a motion to approve all of the 6 items on the consent agenda. Move. Second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? The motion is approved. The first corporate action before the board is approval of the fiscal year 2025 budget. Ms. Doyle.
Thank you. In January, the Trust Audit and Finance Committees met to review the preliminary budget for fiscal year 2025, after which time the preliminary proposed budget was posted in physical locations throughout the park and on our website as required by the authority's budget office. Last week, the Finance Committee met again to review and discuss the proposed budget for fiscal year 2025, and that document has now been also shared with all directors. Preparing the annual budget is a big effort, one that every department here participates in. The effort is led by Sikander Zuberi, our Vice President of Finance, obviously with oversight from Kim Quinones, our CFO. I'd like to thank them both for leading this effort, and as is our practice, Kim Quinones will now present the proposed budget, after which I will ask Director Arwede to provide any context or comments based on the Finance Committee's discussions, as Director Kaplan is not able to be at this meeting today, and ID has graciously agreed. Thank you.
Thanks, Noreen. Good afternoon. I've got the pleasure of presenting the proposed FY25 budget, or as I like to call it, your annual eye test. The budget, along with the projected financial results from the current year, FY24, ending on March 31st. The board has the complete budget package in front of you, In the slideshow, I've broken exhibit 1 in that package down into different components so that they would show nicely on the board and we can go through them. And please jump in with questions anytime. Let's see if this is gonna work. Great. So in the big picture, we're optimistic about revenues for FY25, but we have prepared a budget that allows for economic uncertainties. The newly opened park areas at Gansevoort and Pier 97, which also have new restrooms and concession and maintenance buildings, will add to our ongoing operating costs over the year. That said, operating expenses are budgeted below operating revenues for FY25. And for the upcoming fiscal year, the growth rate of operating revenue at 9% exceeds that of operating expenses, which are at 8%. So first, staying on the slide, let's take a look at an overview with projected results for FY24 and the proposed budget for FY25. We show actual FY23 results. We then present a comparison of budgeted and projected results for FY24 and present the proposed budget for FY25 as required by state finance law. So how do we do in FY24? In the current year, we budgeted total revenues of $37.3 million, but project to end the year with $59.3 million, and that's been highlighted in the green box there because there's a story that goes along with that. The high number is due to 2 extraordinary payments. Both of them are one-time, non-recurring revenues. They were unanticipated when we prepared the FY24 budget and could not have been quantified at that time. The first is an $8.532 million transaction payment that was associated with the Chelsea Piers sale leaseback transaction and was paid to the trust in December of 2023. The second payment is $8.67 million, and that was in association with the permanent underground easement for the Hudson Tunnel portion of the Gateway project. And that's payable to the trust in this fiscal year and is scheduled to be wired to us on this Friday. So together, these payments total $17.2 million. And while they contribute to the year-end projected revenue of $59.3 million, the projected revenue without these payments is $42.1 million, which is slightly above what we realized in FY23. The revenue total for the proposed FY25 budget is $40.7 million, which is higher than the FY24 budget of $37 million, due partly to the increased revenue for the parking garage. There was a rate increase at the parking garage on January 1st. It was 25% rate increase. There are also annual lease escalations that factor into this, and we have expectations for continued economic strength and good percent rent revenues. On the operating expense side, we expect to come in $5.6 million under budgeted operating expenses in FY25, but are still budgeting a moderate increase in below operating expenses in FY24, but we're still budgeting a moderate increase in FY25. So why are we coming in lower in the current year? We budgeted for the openings of Gansevoort Peninsula, Pier 97, and all their amenities, which include a public restroom, a maintenance building, and a concession earlier in the year than they actually happened. And we ended up falling short on the security expenses, the increased utility expenses, and the janitorial needs that we had anticipated for a longer time. We also had lower personnel expenses associated with challenges with filling new and vacated positions in a variety of areas across the trust. So our personnel expenses came down. Net operating income projected for FY24 is $31.7 million or $14.5 million without the extraordinary one-time payments. The FY25 budget is proposed at $4.8 million, slightly below FY24 budget. So finally, illustrating the effect of capital maintenance spending, which is at the bottom, and capital maintenance is capital repairs on existing facilities. A deficit of $8.8 million is budgeted for FY25, similar to that budgeted but not realized because the project's not undertaken in FY24. So we had a lot of emphasis on new construction projects in FY '24, getting those produced at the door. We were successful. We did fewer capital maintenance than we had anticipated, but you'll see it's a continuing theme that we're going to be doing more capital maintenance as we progress. The amount of capital maintenance projects undertaken in any given year, offset by any available fund reimbursements, determines the amount of operating revenues and accumulated surplus that will fund the projects and any resulting operating deficit. So our bottom line there is really affected by how much net CAPM we execute in any given year. Okay, this slide, revenues, is the first section of Exhibit 1 in the budget package. So let's take a deep dive into the components of the revenues in the budget.
Hold on.
There we go. Oops. There we go.
Oh, there it is.
Yeah, but I think I went,
Now it's jumping.
no, that was me.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm trying to figure out what happened here.
So even before the 17.2 million in extraordinary payments this year, revenues from lease and occupancy permits are projected to exceed budget in the current fiscal year by 4.1 million. A combination of factors contributed to this, including stronger than anticipated economic conditions, delivering higher percentage rents. Circle Line and Chelsea Piers were particularly strong. Continuation and extension of the Classic Car Club at their current location, and continued high use of the heliport. Parking revenues met budget as expectations in FY '24, and the garage is expected to be an even larger contributor in FY '25. We're budgeting 12.9 million in parking revenues in FY '25, which is a 20% increase, reflecting continued strong occupancy rates that hover at about 95%. Other sources of self-generated income include event and field fees. And field fees, interestingly, have been up because we've got more fields now. So while it's a small overall contributor, they're very strong. Okay, additional income sources include sponsorships, interest income, contributions, and grants. Overall, these come in slightly lower than FY '24 budget at a total of 4.5 million budgeted in FY '25. So contributing to the decline, interest income will decline as we've been spending our restricted funds, so we're projecting less interest income for next fiscal year, makes sense. But notably, Friends is increasing their budgeted contribution to us to 1.5 million. It used to be 1 million, last couple of years they've given us 1.4. This next year is going to be 1.5. I'm hoping it increases during the year. So total revenue is budgeted at 40.7 million in FY '25, which is a 9% overall increase from the previous year's budget. So looking at the expense side of the equation, the biggest single component, about 40% of the expense budget, is personnel. It's broken down here into full-time, part-time, and seasonals. Overall, the direct cost of the salaries associated with these positions is budgeted at 10.7 million, which is an 8% increase over FY '24. Only one full-time position is added, that is an IT, raising the number of full-time employees to 99. Part-time employees actually decreased by 2 to 4 part-timers, and the number of seasonal employees stays steady at 39. So the increase is largely due to budgeted salary increases necessary to hire qualified individuals. Again, the cost of some of these positions is offset by grant income supporting the education and research activities of the River Project, which hire both full-time and seasonal employees that are offset by grants. Also, the cost of fringe benefits is a cost that's not controlled by the trust. We use the state's healthcare and pension programs. Overall, that's increasing by 12% this year. So the overall increase in the personnel budget is 9% this year, with only one increased headcount. Water here. Okay, so the other component, big component of expenses is other than personal services, OTPS. Total OTPS is budgeted at 20.9 million in FY 25, which is up 7.2% from FY 24. Projected to come in 3.3 million below the current fiscal year budget in OTPS. And contributing factors that are not expected to repeat in FY 25 include the fact that I said before, both Gansevoort and Pier 97 were open later in the year than expected, so cost budgeted for additional maintenance, janitorial, and security services never materialized. Also, utilities are projected to come in lower as new buildings at the two sites, including public restrooms, which are charged both water and wastewater rates, and wastewater rates are 60% higher than regular water rates. Those open later too, with Pier 97 set to open. What? Spring, okay. Also, the other component, parking management expenses increased 14% to 2.2 million in FY 25. More services are needed to keep up with the higher customer volume in the garage. Also, certain contracted parking arrangements require improvements such as fencing. Those increasing costs are built in here, but they're also reimbursed. So there's no negative effect on our bottom line. The final contributor is this catch-all phrase, category called OTPS Other. It's detailed on page 14 of the budget document in a table that is less readable, unfortunately. You gotta look at it online if you want to delve into it. This captures a wide range of services and goods expenditures across all the areas of the park, supporting park operations and administration. This area is increased by 13% to 8.9 million in the current budget and includes general consulting services, which are cover mostly event contracts for public programs, and items such as real estate and engineering consultants, which are often budgeted because of anticipated events, but not expended until required, and also often reimbursed by third parties. So you've got a high amount budgeted, but we're really not sure how much is going to materialize. Depends on how the year goes. So overall, total OpEx, which is personnel and OTPS, is budgeted to increase by 8% to 35.9 million. But again, less than the expected increase in revenues this year. And at the very bottom of the table, net operating income is shown. This is budgeted at 4.8 million in FY 2025 as opposed to 4.1 million in FY 24. Again, you'll note that the FY 24 projected amount is skewed by the one-time ordinary payments in FY 20, extraordinary payments, I should say, in FY 24.
Yeah, I get it. It's very sensitive.
So how will CAPM and CapEx affect this surplus? Just to remind you, CAPM is major maintenance and repairs on existing facilities, and CapEx is investment in equipment. Both are paid for from operating revenues to the extent outside funds or trust area funds are not available. The upcoming fiscal year is one of a shift in emphasis from new capital projects to capital maintenance projects, so we're expecting to execute more of these budgeted CapM projects than in the past. You can see from the projected FY 24 column that we did about 55% of the budgeted projects this year. So after net CapM, which is after the CapM expenditures after outside sources of funds. So after net CapM and CapEx, which was budgeted at 13.7 million in FY 25, again, capital investment, which is not reimbursed. We have an FY 25 budgeted operating deficit of 8.8 million, similar to that budgeted in the current fiscal year. So as always, we will continue to seek additional outside sources of funding for capital maintenance projects to reduce this projected deficit, as with variances in the timing of projects for seasonal delays or changes in needs also affect the bottom line. The next two slides will go quickly. The First chart, which is based on the functional budget information presented in Exhibit 2, takes the budget and shows the changes year over year by functional area. Blue is FY25 and red is FY24. As previously noted, education and park programs expenses are growing, but are partially offset by grant revenues. The second set of bars shows that new park areas necessitate increased spending on grounds, facilities, and capital plant next year. Security, sanitation, and utilities are all planned to be relatively flat. With the exception of security costs are actually slightly less than last year, as the trust has accrued the cost of the retroactive payments under the new PEP contract that are going to get paid out in FY25 when all the contracts are ratified. We've accrued that for FY24. Insurance costs will decrease slightly as new construction is completed in the park. Parking operations expenses increase slightly also to accommodate higher volume in the parking garage. And administrative support and overhead, including legal costs, financial payment functions, procurement, compliance costs, increase as the park areas and service and park activities grow. No surprise. Okay, the next slide shows the relative distribution of the expenses across all park departments. Capital maintenance, which is light green up in the left, at 24% is the highest spending category if all anticipated projects are undertaken. Again, this demonstrates the impact of net CAPM on our bottom line. Grounds, facilities, and capital plant, which is red, is at 19% and is the next biggest expense category. This makes sense. We maintain a clean and inviting park. Costs. Administrative support and overhead is 15% of the expense budget, with extra processes and oversight along with all the legal, compliance, real estate, and accounting fiscal services supporting the park. So moving on to our capital program. These tables are included at the end of your budget package. We spent approximately $42 million in the current fiscal year on new capital projects. Most of it was on Gansevoort Peninsula and Pier 97. FY25 is about wrapping up the loose ends on both projects and turning to design and planning for 29th to 44th Street and the estuarium. So all in all, we have $7.27 million in new capital spending budgeted for FY25. For the first time in a long time, CAPN is more. Our capital maintenance program for FY25, and this comes from Exhibit 7 in the full budget document. A total of $27.8 million is budgeted for the upcoming fiscal year. Over 40% of this will go towards Pier 40, mostly for sprinkler, which is fire suppression systems, sprinkler repairs, and a bit for garage repairs. Also, we've been awarded HUD funds, which will go toward pedestrian safety improvements at Pier 40, and there's no local match required for that. I like that kind of grant. Marine repairs are the next largest category at $5.5 million. These are repairs to the bulkhead and the piers, along with marine inspections throughout the park. Any questions? You happy?
No, I told myself I wasn't gonna ask questions at my first meeting, but I'm sure Noreen is not surprised. The $20 million for the sprinkler and garage repair at Pier 40. Is that our biggest sort of singular cost outside of piles replacement in Pier 40 in sort of the past 5 years or so? Do we think?
What's up there?
Roof not
The roof
completed
is-
yet,
roof
too.
would have been
Yeah.
bigger.
Each segment.
And we've talked about this project previously. This is somewhat of a guess number at this project. We had previously hoped that we would be able to do a combination of repair and replace of the sprinkler system at Pier 40. And last year we announced at a board meeting that we were biting the bullet, that everything basically had to be replaced. So there it is, a procurement's underway now that will be the start of trying to figure out just how big an invert this is. And there's a blend of the sprinkler is integrated with aspects of the roof, so there's some structural components and it is a pretty big job at the end of the day. So this is first of 2 to 3 years of extensive work on the integrated sprinkler and other things that go with it project. Kevin, did I describe that accurately?
True, and the garage repairs are a result of the DOB required inspections of garages citywide. Our garage is completely safe, but it's large and has a lot of concrete things.
So literally the new DOB requirements are if there's a crack, that makes the list and it has to be addressed in a period of time. So things that are not urgent or, you know, very scary still have to be addressed within a period of time.
And we did about, what, 1.5 million of that already this year?
Yeah.
The current fiscal year.
Took care of the easy stuff.
So you're saying it's gonna be 10 million a year for 3 years, or this is the total for?
Yeah, this is not the total. We're guessing, Kevin and I have a kind of a working assumption of about 25 million for sprinkler / garage work over a 2 to 3 year period. Remembering that it's a 15-acre pier.
I know, and that's what the headache of the roof too, and I try to remember that.
And remembering that we've increased parking revenue and other things to try to, you know,
Right, but
manage things
there's
as
no
best
way
as
the
we can.
parking, this pier, that it pays for itself.
Well, I mean, the revenue projection net of expenses, I think is 12 and change
Yeah,
for the coming
almost
year.
13.
So
Oh, okay.
just for perspective,
When we raised the rates, was there any drop off in use?
Not very much. Nope.
it's, we're still lower than a lot of local garages.
But we were so high in our occupancy.
Yeah, we are
We
also
could
looking at
tolerate.
congestion pricing and being mindful about what the wild card that we don't understand yet for congestion pricing. And so we did not want to do this all at once while we see what the fall off might be for that. But
25% was on top of a 10% that was at the beginning of last year.
So we're still the lowest in the neighborhood by wide radius.
And there is some inconvenience associated with parking at Pier 40. We are frequently asking people to move their car around while we are doing sprinklers overhead, for example.
We at one point had somebody who was sort of consulting with us on this, or
Yes, we still do. Dennis Cunning, you approve his contract annually. Dennis does still work with Robert Wing. I would say at this point has done a lot of training of Robert Wing. Robert Wing was our VP of real estate, actually was in the parking garage business himself for several years, and he's quite very, very good and forward looking on parking garage management and really has ponchoed our growth in that area, I would say.
we'll
And
go
it's-
through some clear direction on congestion pricing, maybe we should think about whether or not there's more room to raise rates.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, that, you know, we never set out to be subsidized parking, right? So, you know, and we have actually increased rates over periods of time, but we do so in the context of it being, I mean, not too long ago, there were, you know, we gave people in a particular area of the pier a tarp for their car because of the stuff that fell down on it. So, you know, there are some areas that don't have that problem. A lot of the parking is outdoors. That is the cheapest rate still. It's all self-parking there. We don't have valet parking, and that we think still makes sense for us, but it is a question worth looking at periodically because it is such an important revenue stream for us.
So one last thing I'm obligated to do, which is talk about any factors that could affect us negatively. Obviously, general economic factors could affect leased revenues, parking garage receipts, and or the cost of capital projects. Also congestion pricing, we don't know. Unexpected projects could change the priorities in the capital maintenance program throughout the year. And as always, the ongoing challenge of finding and keeping talented staff, not going to be a problem, but could end up in falling short in our expenses this year too. So once approved, this full package will be posted on our website along with a letter signed by Noreen certifying that the underlying assumptions are reasonable And they will be posted throughout the park and filed with the Office of the State Controller in accordance with state finance law.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think there's that much more for me to add. Thank you, Tim. Thank you, Noreen. Other than to say, the finance committee, and I'm speaking on behalf of the committee chair, Jeff Kaplan here. The finance committee met twice in the last several months, including as recently as last week, to go over this budget, and in as much detail as Kim went over it today, we went into more detail in those conversations, which was great. I think, by all accounts, I mean, this feels like a strong and conservative budget. The core revenues appear to be strong, putting CapEx and CapEx aside. 41 million in revenues, 35 or 36 in expenses, with good growth in sort of your core recurring revenue lines, which is helpful in this environment. Expenses are growing at a pretty fast clip too, at 8%, but with the kind of inflation we've seen and understanding what's driving it, it's not surprising. So I think that's good. The one-time infusions from last year, the 17.2 million, I think are really great, hold us in good stead for what surprises it might be this year. At least there's a buffer there. It appears there's room to handle contingencies from the conversation that we had. We know what the contingencies could be, and if they came up, it sounds like we can handle and manage them. CapEx and CapEx will always be volatile, and will always shift quite significantly. So that's really, it's hard to sort of judge, based on what CapEx is doing in a particular year, as you all know. So I think the finance committee felt pretty unanimously that this is a good budget, a strong budget, a responsible budget in many ways, and also a transparent budget, which I think we all appreciate. So there's not much more to add other than to say, we feel like there's strong financial stewardship. You're all watching pretty closely, and to the extent that things change from what were anticipated in the budget, we will obviously, the finance committee and you all will bring it to the board at the right time. And also the risks you outlined just now came around, what could happen in the new year. Those all sound to me like things any going concern would list, except for condition pricing. They're all things that I think any business is watching, or any organization is watching. So nothing particularly concerning in that regard. So overall, I think it has the imprimatur of the finance committee. So thank you.
Thanks, ID. And thank you, Kim. Are there any questions or comments? More? If not, I will call for a motion to authorize the trust to approve the April 1st, 2024 to March 31st, 2025 budget. I'll move. Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? The motion is approved. The second corporate action item before the board is authorization to contract with Andrew Valles Construction Inc., Suite Group of New York LLC, and Greenway USA LLC, and for on-call general construction. Ms. Doyle.
Thank you. The trust has a continuing need for on-call general construction firms to address small and medium-scale projects that may arise throughout the year. In accordance with the trust procurement guidelines, an RFP for on-call general construction services for the next 3 years was published in the New York State Contract Reporter and on the trust website on November 30th, 2023, and the trust received 7 proposals on the submission deadline of January 11th, 2024. A selection committee comprised of trust staff reviews the submissions and evaluated each according to the identified selection criteria in the RFP, and then interviewed the top 3 ranked respondents. Upon completion of this process, the selection committee determined that Andrew Valles Construction, Suite Group of New York, and Greenway USA each offered well-qualified teams and proposed favorable hourly rates for the desired on-call services. Sorry. Want mine? The page missing. Thank you.
I think that's right.
Okay. More or less there. Yeah. Staff thus recommends entering into 3 separate on-call contracts for the Gansevoort, for the general construction services, each for a 3-year term and for an aggregate maximum value of $3 million for all contracts combined. Projects would be assigned to each contractor at the discretion of the trust. Velez is a New York State certified MWBE firm, and Greenway is a New York State certified SDVOB firm. All three contractors have extensive experience providing similar services for government agencies and large institutional clients, such as New York City Department of Design and Construction, the New York City School Construction Authority, Battery Park City Authority, and Columbia University. Therefore, trust staff requests authorization by the Board of Directors to enter into contracts with Velez, Sweet, and Greenway for on-call general construction services for an aggregate total board authorization amount of up to $3 million over a 3-year period. Funding for the contracts will be identified through the capital maintenance portion of the trust's annual operating budget as approved by the Board of Directors each year.
Thank you. Are there any questions or comments? If not, I will call for a motion to authorize the trust to contract with Andrew Velez Construction Inc., Suite Group of New York LLC, and Greenway USA LLC, and for on-call general construction.
So moved.
Second? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? The motion is approved. The third corporate action item before the board is authorization to amend the contract with Gilbane Building Company for Pier 97 in Gansevoort Peninsula Construction Management Services. Ms. Doyle.
At its November 20th, 2019 meeting, the board authorized the trust to enter into a 3-year contract with Gilbane Building Management Company for Pier 97 and Gansevoort Peninsula Construction Management Services. The board authorized amendments to the contract at the December 2022 and June 2023 meetings. The Gansevoort Peninsula is substantially complete except for small punch list items, and the full Pier 97 site is expected to open to the public this spring, subsequent to the partial opening that occurred in December. However, completion of the Pier 97 building is behind schedule due primarily to delays caused by the need to redesign part of the foundation system following the unexpected encounter of extensive subsurface obstructions encountered during the foundation work. As a result, an additional $400,000 is needed to cover Gilbane's construction management services for the extended building construction period. Trust staff therefore requests board authorization to amend the contract with Gilbane Building Company for Pier 97 and Gansevoort Peninsula Construction Management Services by adding an additional $400,000 for a total board authorization amount of up to $9,166,112 and extending the contract term by 9 months through December 30th, 2024. Funding for this amendment is available from funds provided by New York State and the trust's previous sale of certain development rights.
Questions or comments?
What were the unanticipated?
So at Pier 97, there used to be that geographic area, there used to be a municipal concrete plant there. And we are guessing that they were the remains of crazy old foundations and other debris from that area. But it was extensive. Every time we put a shovel in the ground, we hit something.
Am I right that we worked with Gilbane on other projects as well in the park?
We have worked with Gilbane previously. They've been, we've worked with a few different construction managers, Hunter Roberts, Skanska, Gilbane over the years doing the various big construction projects. And then we work with smaller construction management firms. For example, what was the DAC, right, at Chelsea Waterside Park. So it sort of depends on the scale of the project.
Good experience.
Very good experiences, yes. Yeah, we use construction management firms. You may remember that we actually generally bring CMs into the process fairly early in our design processes, so that we get the benefit of strategic thinking about design decisions even that have the potential to be very costly later on if you haven't thought of them in advance. Staging things in narrow sites, all kinds of things. So CMs are pretty important to us.
Other questions? If not, I will call for a motion to authorize the trust to amend the contract with Gilbane Building Company for Pier 97 and Gansevoort Peninsula Construction Management Services. So moved. Second? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? The motion is approved. The fourth corporate action item before the board is authorization to amend contracts with Interphase Electric Corporation, J.R. Cruz Corporation, and EJ Electric Installation Company related to Gansevoort Peninsula construction. Well,
For this agenda item, the directors have received 3 separate board memos, but I will address the 3 memos together as they each relate to Gansevoort Peninsula construction. As you all know, the trust opened the Gansevoort Peninsula for the public's use and enjoyment in early October 2023, even though construction was still underway for the Gansevoort Park building and for certain other elements of the site that were still under construction, including the dog run and adult fitness area. Since then, the trust contractors have completed the northern portion of the peninsula, and we are now very close to opening the Gansevoort Peninsula building. However, the trust needs to amend 3 of the construction contracts originally approved at the September 2021 meeting. First, the scope of work for the contract with Interphase Electric Corporation for electrical construction services for the Gansevoort Peninsula Park building did not include the key scan hardware used throughout the park to secure and control access to the building. Additionally, while the building's lighting, hardware and fixtures were installed as specified, staff and the design team agree that adjustments are needed to achieve the desired design intent with respect to spotlighting the underside of the building canopy. The trust contract with J.R. Cruz Corporation for Gansevoort Peninsula General Construction Phase 2 work generally consisted of construction of the adult fitness area, dog run, Bloomfield Street entrance, shared use road, and esplanades. Due to circumstances beyond the control of J.R. Cruz, including extended periods of intense inclement weather and other contractor and supplier delays, J.R. Cruz was prevented from finishing the northern end of the park, including the critical Bloomfield Street shared use road required by FDNY Marine Company 1 in time for the park opening. Therefore, the trust directed J.R. Cruz to provide a safe temporary asphalt surface for essential pedestrian circulation and emergency vehicle access during and subsequent to the opening, while work continued on the finished park surface, which was substantially complete by December 2023. In addition, construction of the Gansevoort Peninsula required substantial additional inspections and monitoring to comply with various New York City Department of Environmental Protection requirements. And the trust tasked J.R. Cruz with serving as the certified contractor and inspector for this purpose. Finally, the contract term for EJ Electric for Gansevoort Peninsula Phase 2 electrical services needs to be lengthened to complete some additional punch list work for this spring. EJ Electric's contract was generally for electrical services in the portion of the site encompassing the adult fitness area, dog run, Bloomfield Street entrance, shared use road, and esplanades. For these reasons, trust staff requests board authorization to amend the contract with Interphase Electric for Gansevoort Peninsula building electrical construction for an additional $115,000 for a total board authorized amount of up to $999,762, and to amend the contract with J.R. Cruz Corporation for Gansevoort Peninsula general construction by adding an additional $100,000 for a total board authorization amount of up to $13,995,750 and extend that contract term by 9 months. Funding for both of these amendments is available from capital budget funds for Gansevoort allocated by the City of New York. Finally, trust staff also requests board authorization to ratify and approve an extension of the contract term with EJ Electric Installation Company for Gansevoort Peninsula Electrical Construction Phase 2 by an additional 8 months. Yes.
So I was not here in the past, so catching you up here. So what is the total budget for the construction of Gansevoort?
Gansevoort was about a 70 million total
Right,
budget.
and how do those,
We will come in a bit under that overall.
and then once those are done, you expect that it will be done?
Yes, I mean,
Unless-
there are obviously items. We're looking, we're looking around, obviously, as everything is finishing up, which is another reason for extending Gilbane so that we can make sure that we've captured everything that we want to capture while these contractors are still on the hook and working with us. Given in part the difficulty of other procurement, it's easier in some cases to do it now while a contractor is familiar with it. But generally, Gansevoort is looking good and doing what it was supposed to do.
What's the timeline now?
I mean, where punch list items are literally, I think, this spring for that. We have a DOB inspection for the temporary certificate of occupancy on Friday, fingers crossed. There are things like that at this point.
Thank you.
Is this the above for the kiosk?
For the full building,
Oh, okay.
the restroom. I mean, we're eager to open the restroom. The kiosk, we have to conduct a procurement and figure that out.
Sure.
But the restroom is really
Okay.
nice to open for people.
More questions? Right, I'll call for a motion to authorize the trust to amend contracts with Interface Electric Corporation, JR Cruise Corporation, and EJ Electric Installation Company related to Gansevoort Peninsula construction.
So moved.
Second,
Second?
all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? The motion is approved. The fifth corporate action item before the board is authorization to amend the contract with Verde Electric Corporation for Pier 97 electrical construction. Ms. Doyle.
At its July 2021 meeting, the board authorized the trust to enter into a contract with Verde Electric Corporation for Pier 97 electrical construction services, which work included installation of lighting, power distribution, and other electrical components to build out the new public pier. The design intent for Pier 97 is for electrical service to extend first from the nearest Con Edison manhole to the Pier 97 building, after which power would be distributed throughout the pier and to nearby portions of the Esplanade and the Clinton Cove area of Hudson River Park. At the time the trust released the separate competitive procurements for the Pier 97 site electrical construction work and for the adjacent park building electrical work, the specific route for the electrical conduit was not defined and was thus not included in either contract scope of work. Because Verde is currently working within the geographic area of the now defined route for the electric conduit installation from the Con Edison manhole to the Pier 97 building, the construction manager and trust staff believe it is most efficient for Verde to perform the additional scope while the building contractor continues to perform other electric work within the building interior. Verde is approved by Con Edison to perform the service connections and will also be solely responsible for providing a warranty for all of the lighting fixtures throughout the site, excluding the building. Accordingly, trust staff requests board authorization to amend the contract with Verde Electric Corporation for the Pier 97 electrical construction by an additional $300,000 for a total board authorized amount of up to $2,506,705. Funding for this amendment will be provided from capital funds allocated to the trust by New York State.
Questions, comments?
The least substantive comment till here today is I believe that from manhole is being replaced, I think, with maintenance hole or utility holes.
Thank you for that. Okay. We'll try to remember that.
I'm so glad we women have made such progress. That now manhole.
It's still being like.
Yeah, that was really high on my list.
Pam, I think that's her.
Amazing comments. Follow up on that? Got it. All right, if not, I will call for a motion to authorize the trust to amend the contract with Verde Electric Corporation for Pier 97 electrical construction. Second,
Yes.
all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? The motion is approved. Do we have a sixth today?
That's it.
That's it?
Yeah, they just go to present report. We're good. Zipping along.
That completes the board action items for approval today. I would now like to ask Ms. Doyle to present the president's report.
Great. New Yorkers flock to their parks each year the moment the temperatures start climbing in March, and Hudson River Park is no exception. Even though most of us were wearing our parkas last week, the glorious early days of spring brought crowds to our new science playground, to the Gansevoort Peninsula, and to every pathway in the park. At the science playground, we've begun looking at options for stroller parking and other ways to improve circulation when the playground is crowded, which is often. Fortunately, we were able to reopen the area of Pier 25 where the swings are located after making some improvements there this winter, so children and their parents can now again use that area as well. We expect to complete the improvements in the water play area of the original Pier 25 playground in time for water sprinkler season in May too. Meanwhile, Alpine Construction will return to the science playground this spring to complete plantings and to activate the playground's fog plume feature too. So you'll have to come back for that. It's also been fun to watch people use the Gansevoort Peninsula all winter long. Even on cold days, the Adirondack chairs with their views to Days End and Lower Manhattan skyline have been well used. And now that the weather is warming, you will see children playing in the sand, dogs happily playing in the new dog run, and hopefully not the sand, and sports teams utilizing the fields. We believe we are very close, as you just heard, to obtaining the TCO from the New York City Department of Buildings for the park building, and once that's in hand, we'll be opening the restrooms for the public. Otherwise, various contractors will be returning to the site to complete punch list items and to put finishing touches on a few areas. For example, JR Cruz will be returning in April to complete the permanent dog run striping. The areas now open at Pier 97 have also been widely used on some of the recent warm days, and I enjoyed getting our first fan mail from a couple who live on West 57th Street who had wandered into the pier one weekend in early March. Aside from sharing that they are looking forward to enjoying many sunsets from the Pier 97 lounge chairs, one of these guests also noted that his great-grandparents had immigrated from Sweden and that they had likely taken some of their very first American steps on the original Pier 97. They've already signed up to be volunteer gardeners with friends also at this new public pier, and they are good photographers as well, so I will say that about them. Meanwhile, the trust and its contractors continue to advance completion of the balance of the pier, including the Belvedere, overlook, and playground in late spring. Work on the new restroom park maintenance building is progressing with the roofing, windows, and wall insulation recently completed. Trade contractors continue to install electric, plumbing, and HVAC inside the building. And later this week, I think, we expect that the contractor will start installing the louvers, the distinctive louvers on the facade. So that will really be when we can start seeing the building take form. We'll be planning a proper celebration for the formal opening, and we'll work with the offices of Governor Hochul and Mayor Adams in hopes that they'll be able to attend, and of course, all of you. As you'll recall from our last meeting, the trust selected Marvell Architects to lead the landscape and esplanade design for the upland area between 29th and 44th Streets. The contract is now in effect, and the trust design and construction staff held an initial kickoff meeting recently with Marvell. The trust intends to begin community and stakeholder engagement and outreach later this year, and I'll keep you all informed of expected dates. With regard to the estuarium, EHDD, Sage and Coombe, and the other members of the team have continued to advance design of the building, landscape, exhibits, water intake, and mechanical systems into the schematic design phase. A major part of their and our staff effort is with respect to eventual building and exhibit operations by both our river project and facilities staff. With such a tight site and with significant fundraising for this project still to be achieved, we collectively need to ensure that interior spaces are designed for flexibility and adaptability over time. And of course, with an eye towards not wasting any space. The designers are also studying exterior materials and fenestration decisions within the floodplain, while also further developing the interior layout and overall building appearance. And we expect that we'll be scheduling updates for the board's design committee and community later this spring. As previously reported, after about 20 years of service and heavy use, it became clear in 2023 that the Pier 45 wood decking needed substantial replacement. Construction was divided into two phases so that as much of the pier could remain open as feasible. I'm happy to report that the work is going well and should be complete by May 2024. Last, and as you heard from Kim during the budget presentation, after several years of focusing on completing new park areas at Gansevoort, Pier 97, the science playground, and the new restroom and reimagining of the Chelsea Waterside Park area, staff expects capital maintenance to again become the dominant areas of trust expenditures in fiscal years 25 and 2026. Assuming regulatory approvals are secured, we expect to invest in marine infrastructure for typical but costly repairs at various park piers and bulkhead locations. At Pier 40, the sprinkler and garage repairs will be costly, and most of the development rights proceeds reserved for Pier 40 have now been depleted. The loading dock roof is in poor condition, and it will be another expensive, complicated project to remove and potentially replace. Roofs at our various boathouses are now approximately 20 years old, and just like any home roof, will need to be replaced, and so on. A more mature park will need more TLC to keep it in good condition. We're fortunate we have funding in place from New York State and New York City, and from prior development rights sales to complete the new park area between West 29th and West 46th Streets. But this is as good a time as any to say for the record that we will likely need to rely on ourselves for generating most capital maintenance funding, as has been the case throughout our history. Of course, the trust will continue seeking grants and donations and to avail itself of other construction funding opportunities as feasible. I'll pause here for any questions. Okay. Historically, spring is the River Project's most popular season for school field trips, and this year the trust has increased the number of available time slots to accommodate increasing demand. In particular, the Pier 57 Discovery Tank has provided our River Project team with its first year-round programming space, and so far these programs have been very popular, with 77% of our groups coming from Title I schools. The classroom's high-tech elements help our educators expand beyond traditional classroom curricula to create an exciting experience for students visiting the park. I thought I'd share this unsolicited note from one of the teachers from the Title I public school in Queens that was visiting us here at the Discovery Tank with her students for the first time earlier this month to attend a pollution solutions class. Here's her letter. I just need to tell you that our trip today was awesome. In my years, this was so beautiful. Beautifully executed. Top-notch staff, perfectly run, good room management. The activity is appropriately paced. It aligned with so much content we have done this year and recently. I will be sharing with our experience with administrators. I just wanted to share our excitement. The kids' only issue was they wished it was longer and that we could see more. I did share with them the availability for families to go on Saturdays. That excited them. It's a nice thing. I hope this gives you a small taste of why we're so proud of our environmental educational programming and the thoughtful and creative approaches that educators take to introducing students, adults, and families to our estuarine sanctuary and why the environment should matter to each of us. On that note, our annual Submerge Marine Science Festival is now scheduled for May 17th and 18th. While Submerge was previously held during the fall season, following feedback from local teachers, we've decided to move this festival to May to make the event more accessible to New York City students. This season, we are also excited to debut a new program on Gansevoort called Salt Marsh Science. This program will teach field science skills to students who will have the opportunity to build a model of a salt marsh, conduct analysis of tide pools, and explore this inspiring green space. The River Project team has also been offering public-facing programs in the Discovery Tank this winter, including the popular Painting Nature, Ask the Scientist, and guided gallery events. During gallery open hours, the Trust educators highlight rotating educational exhibits to teach about fascinating aspects of the Hudson River Park ecosystem. March's theme focused on oysters, and you should take a look around the corner if you can before you leave at the interactive wall there. Of course, you already know that in recent years, the Trust has installed over 35 million juvenile oysters into park waters on enhancement structures like reef balls and oyster gabions in Tribeca and Gansevoort. We're thrilled to report that Congressman Nadler has allocated $963,000 for additional enhancement and research in the current NOAA funding bill that recently passed Congress. And River Project staff has already begun thinking about potential additional enhancements with members of our technical advisory committee for our sanctuary. This new federal funding is in addition to the $750,000 appropriated by Senators Schumer and Gillibrand, along with Congressman Nadler, for habitat enhancement monitoring last year. With the funding, the River Project expects to increase its monitoring program of the existing habitat enhancements this year. The Trust Public Programs Department has been very busy planning for the 2024 programming season, and we're excited to announce that the Trust will be bringing back many of our beloved series like Sunset on the Hudson, Healthy on Hudson, and Sunset Salsa. Blues Barbecue is planned for a mid-August date and will feature an amazing lineup of blues artists from around the country. We're also bringing new and exciting programming to Pier 97 and 14th Street Park and have a plan in the works for an unusual family fun event on Pier 76 on Labor Day weekend. That's my teaser. You'll just have to wait for more. We'll be announcing our lineup in April, and we will be sure to share the calendar with all of you. Unfortunately, we were notified that the annual Food and Wine Festival that we hosted at Pier 76 for several years running will be moving to Brooklyn this year. But the phones continue to ring with ideas and requests for other events, and as usual, we consider each such event proposal carefully. You may have read in your newspapers that the Sail Forth 250, otherwise known as OpSail, has been formed to celebrate the 250th birthday of the United States. As a major component of a nationwide endeavor, Sail Forth 250 will host tall ships and vessels from around the world in the New York Harbor over the weekend of July 4th, 2026, which is also when the finals for the World Cup will be in the region. The organizers of the event expect to host many ships at pier locations throughout the park. Much has changed in the park since OpSail was last year in 2000, and the majority of the park consisted of select concrete piers, no security infrastructure, and very few trees or lawns. The organizers have been proactive about meeting with us to learn about pier conditions, site constraints, tenants, and operations, and will continue working with them and a host of agencies and other partners as planning for this national celebration advances. Hudson River Park is a huge presence in New York City, but we're also a very challenging site for hosting crowds, as we know from the annual Pride Weekend celebrations. Our slender piers, bordered on one side by the Hudson River and on the other by an active highway, require extensive planning and consideration of crowd safety, and each pier essentially requires its own site plan. It's going to be a busy 2 years. With the completed renovation of Chelsea Waterside and the opening of Gansevoort Peninsula, our biggest organized ball sports season ever kicked off on March 11th. Each season, the Trust, and no doubt our colleagues at City and State Parks, receive requests for field permits that vastly outstrip available time and space. With our brand new facilities, we're proud to say that this spring season, we have permitted 55 groups across 7 fields for over 6,500 hours of practice and play time. Summer season applications will open on March 18th and will be due no later than April 22nd. And I'll pause again here for any questions.
Can I go back to oysters for a
Yeah.
second, Noreen? What is our we dropped these 35 million in the, do we have a good survival rate in terms of, are they like growing and reproducing, and are the right things happening?
So we have an extensive monitoring program that is part of our commitment here. And what, the very robust year 1 monitoring plan, in part from last year, indicated that some of the recruitment that is happening on these structures is actually from the Tappan Zee oysters further upriver, and that in fact more of the larger oysters that seem to be growing seem to be making their way from up the river to us. Oysters often have a mortality, I'm sort of over my skis here, but I think oysters have a mortality rate
Started on oysters.
with water temperatures that get too high sometimes, so there's still a lot of learning, and Patrick may want to chime in on this in the whole region about survival rates and the investment. So I should have Carrie come back and talk in more detail about this. That's about all.
It is a key part of the research questions. So as part of Tribeca, we have a 3-year research project going there. We did not have that at Gansevoort. We had a first-year monitoring one. The new money from, not money from Congressman Nadler, 750, is going to go towards monitoring that. And actually, we're going to be trialing new monitoring techniques. Right now, it's quite disruptive. You have to lift the balls out of the river, which frankly actually harms a little life as you're doing it. So we're working with the Chen Lab out of SUNY Stony Brook to trial a new method that includes underwater essentially video cameras and then doing the counting via video. It's a clear water box. It's like we are kind of we own it, we have it, we built it. So we are trying sort of a new method that we're hopeful will let us get similar results or similar quantity of information that will then be echoed out to monitoring in the region, if not as part of a larger system.
And does the trust have sole responsibility for the monitoring, or does
Yeah.
Billion Oysters
So
doing responsibility?
while we've contracted with Billion Oyster Project for the actual oysters for helping do some of the counting and monitoring, it's in a contract basis. So it's really our design, our initiatives, our project, and therefore our responsibility as far as this goes. Thanks to our operations, facilities, and horticulture staff, the park is starting to look amazing with color emerging from the ground. The daffodils are in full bloom everywhere. White hyacinths and some other woodland bulbs are poking their heads above ground. I saw my first orange tulips of the spring on my way here today. Facilities will begin re-energizing water systems to the drinking fountains park-wide beginning in April, and all display fountains and splash features will be turned on by Memorial Day weekend. The trust contractors are actively working to repair broken pavers throughout the park's esplanade. New York State DOT's contractor will also begin repairs on pavers adjacent to the Route 9A bikeway starting in April. The Trust Public Safety Department and local NYPD precincts also plan to conduct joint bike safety education and enforcement operations at strategic locations along the bikeway in April. With regard to real estate and planning, as a follow-up from the last board meeting, staff is continuing to negotiate the concession agreement with New York Water Tours, Inc. as the conditionally selected operator in response to our Pier 40 Marine Uses RFP. The parties are very close to completing the final terms, and we hope to have a final agreement signed by early April. New York Water Tours also presented at the Community Board 2's Waterfront and Parks Committee on February 7th, and they provided a very good overview of their planned operations at Pier 40. The trust staff also continues to review proposals in response to its non-alcoholic beverage vending concession and branding sponsorship opportunity, RFP, in which the trust received 3 proposals on the RFP due date of January 24th, 2024. Through this RFP, the trust expects to continue to host about 30 serviced vending machines with beverages and some snacks available to park patrons in certain locations as a revenue-generating concession. Trust staff is continuing to review in more detail the proposals and expects to have a new concession in effect in April. And I'll update the board on the final selection and concession agreement at the next meeting. As you've heard from me previously, staff attended meetings of Manhattan Community Board 4 in January and February to discuss Pier 76 as a continuation of the conversation begun through the Pier 76 Task Force in 2023. In March, CB4 adopted a resolution indicating support for some potential amendments to the Hudson River Park Act to give the trust more flexibility to identify an appropriate use that can generate needed income in support of the park, while also advancing our collective public open space goals for the pier. CB4's letter expressed willingness to open the act for commercial office as long as the height is no taller than the Javits Center, hotel, hotels and floating restaurants, waterborne commercial transportation, AKA blue highway uses, and light manufacturing for green technologies. CB4's support for such amendments must be viewed within the context of the trust commitment to continue working proactively with community stakeholders to ensure that whatever the eventual revenue generating uses on a portion of Pier 76 may be, they do not come at the expense of the high quality public open space that is also important for that large pier. Staff have been in touch with Assemblymember Tony Simone and Senator Brad Hoylman to discuss next steps and anything they may need from the trust as they consider whether to introduce legislation for Pier 76 in this legislative session. We've promised to attend the April meeting of the Advisory Council to present and answer questions about Pier 76, including materials previously provided to the Advisory Council and broader community as well. We so appreciate the work of the task force and the community board and the advisory council as we continue to plan for this pier, not to mention also the trust that the community has placed in the trust by being willing to engage in these discussions. It goes without saying that we cannot take such trust lightly and that we must continue to engage with the advisory council, community boards, and other stakeholders on this and other issues as we continue to plan and steward for the park beyond Pier 76 as well. We'll keep the directors informed if we learn that new legislation is indeed proposed for the June legislative session. Trust staff met with Battery Park City Authority and members of their design and engineering teams on March 20th to discuss the authority's design plans for the portions of their resiliency project that will impact Hudson River Park's southern border. Since planning began, the extent of construction in sanctuary waters and along the bikeway has been very significantly reduced, and the trust appreciates BPCA's efforts to address trust concerns. The resiliency project is nevertheless very complicated, including with respect to the need for new subsurface infrastructure regulated by DEP that will require multi-year closures and detours in the southern section of Hudson River Park. Both BPCA and the trust agree that there are opportunities for improved physical connections to and from our parks as well. Our design and construction team is currently reviewing a number of drawings received from BPCA. We also continue to discuss agency jurisdictional issues related to the southernmost portion of Hudson River Park. From our perspective, the options are either an amendment to the Hudson River Park Act that changes the park's southern boundary, or potentially the granting of a permanent easement by New York State. We'll keep the board informed as planning continues. And finally, the trust is very close to finalizing the collective bargaining agreement with the International Union of Operating Engineers, Local 30, that I'll discuss in executive session. Before I conclude, I would like you to join me in recognizing Daniel Miller of our advisory council. It's impossible for me to believe, but probably very possible for him to believe, that it's already been 2 years since he assumed his role as chair of the advisory council. Daniel, I think this is your third tour duty as chair, which is really extraordinary. I can't really tell you how much work goes into being the chair of the advisory council. It's the big meetings, it's committee meetings, and it's countless emails from people in between. And we're very grateful to you, Daniel, for volunteering so much time in support of the park. So please join me. Thank you. Unless there are more questions for me, I think it's finally his turn.
I know we don't have a lot of time, so I'm known for my brevity, so I'll maintain my brevity. Well, thank you. It's been an honor actually serving, and I followed the lead of Jeffrey, who actually showed me how to be a chair. So, and we also want to congratulate Jeffrey because the advisory council is a unique position here, where Jeffrey sat on our meetings for the last 4 years or so. And so he understands the issues that we as public advocates are trying to express to the board. So we find as a win-win that Jeffrey's with you. So thank you, Jeffrey. And I know that we know each other's texts, so yeah. So we had a meeting on March 12th, and I was complimented on the brevity of it. It was only 90 minutes, and we all had a social at Harlem Hops thereafter. The big topic was membership. We have 2 openings on the advisory council. So look to you folks that we're looking for organizations that have a connection to the park, that also reflect the diversity that you see in the park. If you know of any organizations that want to apply, we're extending the deadline for a couple more months to have our full 50 members. And our bylaws pretty much describe it, so I don't have to get into that detail. So as Noreen told you, every 2 years, we have a new chair. Tammy Meltzer of CB1 is currently going to be taking over. I'm not sure if she's going to stay on it for how long, because it's a kind of a extensive role, as Jeffrey will tell you, as CB4 chair, as well as Hudson River Park Advisory Council. So we're under some leadership changes. Jeffrey's leaving. We don't have a CB4 representative yet. We have some big issues with Pier 76. It's really important to have CB4 at the table to discuss the letter and why it was approved, because oftentimes we take the lead from the CBs, at least as other community board members, what's happening in their districts. So aside from membership, we also very lightly touched upon swimming in the Hudson, report that was presented by Rob Pirani, something that will probably go into more detail. And finally, probably the most important business happened in the Harlem Hops social, which is a discussion about some of our members feel like it would be great to discuss the budget before it's approved. So it's been approved today. And I know there were members of the advisory council that asked Robert, who's been amazing, by the way, communicating with us, to actually represent the budget to us. So I think that's probably going to be an important agenda item coming up in next month. So it was really educational for me to see how you spend the money. It was a great presentation, and a high level one I think would be great. And if you let me know what time it's going to be posted, so I can have everybody, you said that the budget's going to be posted, have everybody do their due diligence and read it, so you don't have to go through the whole thing. This way we can just maybe address questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dan. And thank you for your service to the council of the park. Connie Fishman is unable to attend today to present the Hudson River Park Friends report. So we won't have that today. Is there any further business from anyone? If not, I now request that the directors move into executive session to discuss personnel-related matters and that we adjourn the public portion of the meeting. The executive session will not include any action items for approval by the directors. May I please have a motion to move into executive session and adjourn the public portion of today's meeting?
So moved.
Second,
Second.
all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? The motion is approved. Thank you. The public portion of this meeting is now adjourned. The trust will now stop the recording and the directors will now meet in executive session. Thank you.